Welcome back once again to Vetted with Mark Vetter. And today we're really excited. This is one I have been looking forward to. We're talking with Dr. Missy Widmann of Neural Education, the Institute for Connecting Neuroscience with Teaching and Learning. Missy also is a visiting assistant professor at Pacific Lutheran University and has been a public school educator. So she spans the experiences of being on the actual cutting edge, as well as working with kids. So, Missy, thank you and welcome to Vetted with Mark Vetter. We really appreciate you joining us today. To
Hi,
start
Mark.
off with, hi, okay, to start off with, tell us a little bit about your journey to co-founding Neural Education.
Oh boy. All right. I'll take you on the journey. So I started teaching, I tell my students I started teaching in the 1900s. So literally I did my student teaching in 1999, and I've been in the health and fitness space. And then I started like really getting into technology, and I was teaching anatomy and physiology in the Bethel School District. And I was one of the first educators that had the iPads. So I was part of the pilot, and I just happened to get the iPads as part of that pilot program. And so then I really started looking at students and how learning was happening. And two things happened. I really started looking at engagement with students, and I started looking at neuroplasticity. And I was really interested in neuroplasticity because I've been in health and fitness. I've been teaching PE classes for years. And I thought, whoa, PE is really important. Movement is really important. And so I started really bringing movement into the classroom and utilizing technology at the same time. So there was this whole thing that was happening in my world that was different than anything I'd ever learned in any of my education classes. And so I remember thinking, wow, there's really something here. There's something that's really untapped here, but I didn't really know what it was. And I went to a conference called NCCE. By the way, if you have not been, it's a fantastic conference. Every educator should go to NCCE in Seattle. But I went to that conference and I met Dr. Kiran Omani, and he was doing a session called Engaging the Brain. And he was doing it alongside Con McQuinn. And they were two people, one in higher ed, University of Washington, Dr. Omani, and one at an educational service district, Con McQuinn. And they were really diving into educational neuroscience. And after I went to that session, I was like, this is a thing. Every teacher needs to know about this. And so I just kept, I asked for his card. I gave him my card, and I just kept bugging him for a couple months before he agreed to have a cup of tea with me. And then we started having tea every Sunday. Like, we just spent our Sundays together for like a year. And in that year, we co-created our first ever Neuroscience of Learning Summer Institute for Neural Education. And we started a nonprofit as well. That was 2017 that we started that nonprofit. And we have been growing ever since. We're all educators in the field who are just really getting curious about learning and neuroplasticity and how we can design classroom instruction in order to create more transferable skills for students.
And lately, you've been working a little bit on the early research around AI in the adolescent brain.
Yeah. And how can you not?
Well, and on your website, you talk about neural education was founded to dismantle the barriers of stress, bias, and emotional reactivity. And I highlighted those three words because I asked Copilot what AI does to the adolescent brain, and it said, well, it can cause stress. We have to deal with biases, and emotional reactivity is there. So based upon let's just kind of the foundational understanding, what is it that you understand or that you've learned so far about how AI influences the adolescent brain development during that critical period of plasticity?
Well, I think it's really important to understand neuroplasticity first. And basically, neuroplasticity are based on Marion Diamond's research. We followed Dr. Marion Diamond and she did research starting in the 1960s, a woman in the 1960s doing neuroscience research. Side note, she was also the person that diagnosed or that dissected Einstein's brain to find out how his brain was different. So she's a big deal in our world. But basically, her research, which has been replicated over and over and over again. So her seminal research really showed that there were 5 things in the environment that helped our brains grow. And when she talked about brain growth, she talked about these neural connections between neurons. And so the 5 things that she said grow, she calls build a better brain, are diet, which speaks to my heart in the health and fitness world. Exercise, again, speaks to my heart. Again, productive struggle, she calls it challenge, but as educators, we call it productive struggle. Novelty, we might call this like newness, novelty in our classrooms. And then love, we call that sense of belonging. And so she talks about how we have to have those 5 things in order to have structural adaptation. And when she talks about structural adaptation for the people that want to just like get into the neuroscience, it's dendritic plumage, which is what connects neurons together, and myelination, which is like the cord. You know, if you have a cord that's got like plastic coating over it, it's more efficient. And so the more myelination we get over that, the more efficient, the more transferable learning is. And so she helps us understand the things that we need to do in our classrooms to design instruction. And I don't think, I'm not sure she was thinking very specifically about AI when she was doing this work, but a curiosity that I have had is how are we outsourcing our thinking with AI? And if we are outsourcing our thinking, we are not creating adaptation in the brain. And if we're not creating some kind of adaptation in our brains or our students' brains, that learning is not transferable. And Mark, I'm sure you've seen this. I have gotten this so many times with students where they will literally send me something that still has the ChatGPT prompt in it. And so I'm like, oh no, we're outsourcing our thinking. And so what that started me on is a journey of how do I create instruction where students can use AI as an assistant, yet they're not outsourcing their thinking. And I've had to change a lot of my instruction because it was too easy to use ChatGPT to do the assignment. And to be honest, I'd probably do the same.
You just hit my second and third questions I had written down and prepared. So I'm interested in the whole concept of struggle because I think it is incredibly important, but I also know, gosh, okay, I'm really old. I started teaching in 83 and I had a gifted classroom for the first 10 years. You know, that was one of my sections. And I would put problems in the middle of the table and assign students to use whatever tools they could find to solve that problem. It might be, why were the Conestoga wagons wheels so large? You know, trying to look at historical documents. Is there a way to use AI and still have struggle and still get them to process cognitively in a way that's going to build that memory consolidation?
Yeah, and that takes us to another researcher, Dr. Mary Helen Immordino Yang, another one that we follow. She's at USC right now, and we love her because she was a science teacher who got really curious about learning and then went and got her degree in psychology and neuroscience. And now she does like fMRI studies on students who are learning. And what she says is it is neurobiologically impossible to think deeply about something you don't care about. And oftentimes in education, we are teaching things to kids that they don't care about. And if they don't care about it, they're going to outsource their thinking. And we are the same. If we don't care about something, if I have to put an evaluation together for my principal, sorry, principals out there, I love you all. If I have to do an evaluation and I don't care that much about it, like I just want to get it off my plate, I'm 100% going to outsource my thinking. And so how can we bring things into our classroom that actually bring our students funds of knowledge, brings the things that our kids care about, or engage them in a way that they all of a sudden care about? Well, like all of a sudden now they care about the size of tires, right, or wheels, because you brought it in as a problem first. And Dr. Imardino Yang says, oftentimes we think about learning as like little bits and pieces, like you have to know this before you can know this, and it's very linear. But she says actually the brain doesn't work that way. And how we connect and where we connect to the learning is we connect to it because of something that we care about ourselves. And then once we get that connection, then that's when all that engagement happens. And when we have engagement, that's when we have adaptation of brain. And AI can be incredibly engaging. I have my students ask Consensus AI about nutrition research. We ask questions we care about, and then my students dive into it because they already care about it. Versus, all right, everybody, we're going to read this article. Everybody's reading the same article. I'm telling you, this is really important for you because it's related to nutrition. Versus, ooh, what question do you have about nutrition? Each of you have something that you're curious about. Let's take a moment to think about what we're curious about. And then let's go see what we can access with AI. And now we've got research articles that now I want to read. I care about it. So it's that connection that she calls it engagement. And I call it engagement too. And I also call it attention, where the brain, where the brain wants to attend to, then that's where that learning is going to happen.
So we can fight cognitive offloading through engaging materials, hopefully aimed at each individual student, because AI can do that, right? We have an incredible amount of data on our students. We know all the books they've checked out in the library. We know how they have succeeded in different reading scores. I believe that there's a book that changes everybody's life. For each student, there's that one book that ignites their love of reading and their love of learning, right? My wife taught K-3 struggling readers. She would look through interest cards on kids, and she would ask the kids all kinds of questions about themselves before she began teaching them reading, to find that one subject that would make them want to tackle that challenge, right? So that's all you're doing, though, but at a grander scale, at a higher level. So if we're going to use AI, is it going to be a better tool for the teachers to create the engagement lessons personalized for kids, or is it going to be a tool that the kids are going to use to demonstrate their learning?
Both. And I will say, I have seen it done in kindergarten classes. I have seen it done in high school classes. And you know what you were saying about your wife and then me doing it at a grander scale. No, what your wife was doing was the grand scale. She was providing an opportunity for kids to sit in their own thinking and start determining what it is that they care about versus making assumptions about what they care about and then teaching them based on those assumptions. So as educators, oftentimes we're trying to follow the script, we're trying to follow the frameworks. We feel as though we can't move away from that because we're going against what we're asked to do by our districts. And what's happening is we're missing out on those opportunities to really give our students time to engage. And what Einstein, I love his quote that he says, it's not that I'm smarter than everybody, it's that I sit in a problem longer. And that's adaptation, that's brain adaptation. Mm-hmm. And Marion Diamond saw it under the microscope. And it's not that he had more brain cells, it's that he had more connections between those brain cells, because that was that productive struggle piece where he would just sit in it longer and let that curiosity fester. And we don't always feel like we can do that in schools.
One of the greatest fears with AI in adolescents is how it may shape their identity formation and their emotional regulation. Have you done any studies or read any literature on that?
Okay, well, it's new. So let's say it's new. I can share with you some of the research, both that came out of Stanford post-COVID, and also is Imardino Yang, Dr. Imardino Yang is doing right now as well. And that's really looking at the development of the areas of the brain. And one of the things that happens under stress, emotional reactivity, and under isolation is thinning of the cortices. And that's the part of the brain here, that's your prefrontal cortex, that is where those critical thinking skills, that's where you're transferring the learning, like, hey, I learned this and now I'm going to move it into this other space. That's that deep thinking. That's you know, giving kids a problem to start out and questioning, like, why are the size of the wheels big on these vehicles, right? And so that's that's the myelination, the dendritic plumage that happens here, that is what we know of as neuroplasticity. And as long as we're in spaces where we're constantly using that space, just like a muscle, I know brain is not muscle. People get upset when you hear that. And I know brain is not a muscle. I understand. But if you don't use it, you don't continue to develop it. And that is crucial for our students. And it's crucial because there is more neuroplasticity, that adaptability is higher in those school age years. But what's happened through like during COVID, this is, oh gosh, what's his name? It'll come to me. I'll bring it to you. But he did research on the 15-year-old brain and was looking at, is there a key signature to the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old brain? And then COVID happened. And then it was like, oh no, we just did this research project. What are we going to do? It's longitudinal. And so they decided, let's look at the pre-COVID brain 15 and the post-COVID brain, or he called it peri-COVID, 1 year post. And the research found thinning cortices and larger amygdalae. So thinning cortices, meaning you don't have as much access to that transferability of learning in critical thinking, collaboration, communication, all those things that industry is begging us, like, please, we need these students to have these skills. And the same thing Imardino Yang is finding, if students don't have an emotional connection to what it is that they're learning, the learning doesn't happen in that cortices area. And so she even recognized there's thinning of cortices if we are not engaging with the students and providing opportunities for them to engage in things that they care about, or give them an opportunity to find a way to care about it. Then AI or not, that neuroplasticity isn't happening. But I'm telling you, I see it all the time. I see people using AI about things that they really care about, and they are actually learning more in those spaces, and they're able to bring more forward. And then on top of that, now they have to question the AI. That is critical thinking. That's a beautiful opportunity for them to go, whoa, is AI hallucinating? Is this real? What are the resources that it's using? Experts say, what experts? Research shows, what research? Like, don't let that be the end of it. Let's go in and look at it further. And as long as they care about the topic, they're gonna dive in.
Mental health and well-being, with some AI agents demonstrating empathy, mental health support. You say, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Depending upon the agent, right? There's ethical AI by some companies, and then there's wide open AI. Do you have concerns about mental health and kids being led, or even adults being led down a road that this machine learning is portraying itself as a counselor?
If we go back to Marion Diamond's work, she had those 5 things that build a better brain. Right. And the last one that I told you about was love. And her research was on rats. And what she found is if they pulled the rats out of the cage and they held them on their lab coats, and they did it every day and just gave a moment of time together, their rats went from living 600 days to 900 days. So love is not just necessary for learning, but it's necessary for longevity. If you look at blue zones, Bethel's doing a whole bunch of work on blue zones right now. And one of the things about blue zones is human connection. And so I'm not saying anything bad about AI that, I might want to Google AI. But when it comes down to it, or, use AI for some extra supports or something, but when it comes down to it, that human connection is a biological need that we all have. And it doesn't stop post-infancy. It's something that our brains and our bodies need that in order for us to stay regulated. We know that because if we're having a bad day and we go walk with somebody we care about, we feel better. I'm not sure sitting, based on brain-body responses, I'm not sure AI is going to have the same impact through a screen that a walk and talk with a friend is going to have. I don't know the research on it, but I will say that Kelly McGonigal, who's a researcher in Stanford, she really talks about the impact of movement on regulation, on that brain-body response, and the difference between cortisol, which creates that stress response, and oxytocin, which creates that connection, trust, and bonding. And there's a lot to be said about the impact of isolation versus the impact of people being in community together and moving in community. It's why we go to tea together. It's why we eat together. We're mirroring each other all the time. We're in movement together. And that's a necessary thing for us as humans, but it's also a necessary thing based on Dr. Marion Diamond for learning.
So there are companies out there right now where you can purchase curriculum, AI-generated agents to teach your child in homeschool. So basically, they're dealing with a non-human being the entire day throughout their entire school day. What's going to be the impact upon those kids and their brains?
Here's a little action research. And by the way, this is not a white paper. This is just me getting invited into classrooms and noticing some things. When I go into a classroom and I see a teacher doing their best, they're really doing their best, and they're trying to manage all the things, and they put on a Go Noodle. And the Go Noodle is the person now that student is connecting with. And then the teacher is like, oh, now's the chance to check my email, right? That's a missed opportunity for trust and connection. And Rita Pearson tells us all the time, kids don't work for people they don't like. And so every time we have a missed opportunity to mirror with kids, to connect with kids, to utilize our evolutionary need for bonding, we are missing out on that reciprocal serve and return relationship that we were literally born. That's how we created safety in our families, right? And so with the AI coming in, or it doesn't have to be AI, I don't care what it is. It could be just a screen. Let's just put the kids on a screen. Those are opportunities that are missed. Now, what is the neurobiological long-term impact? I don't personally know based on research I have done, but when I go into classrooms where teachers they put the Go Noodle on, it's got good ideas, right? But they're doing it with their kids. The kids are laughing, they're in community with their teachers building more trust and rapport with the students. And you see it in the classroom when now the kids are asked to do reading, writing, and math, those things that come with a high cognitive load. There's a lot of productive struggle, but as long as you have high supports and high structures in that space, and that's got trust built in, the kids, we work really hard for people we like and people that we trust. And so when we're not in movement together, we are missing an opportunity for that evolutionary bonding that helps us build long-term trust.
It seems like the more I experience things, the more things come around. In the 80s, rigor, relevance, and relationships. And that's all you've been describing, right? So here we go.
And we are, AI, I'm watching when what's that AI school that came out, Alpha. When I first heard about that, I was like, cool, like I want to check this place out. And kids go in for 2 hours and they get taught by AI, and they literally get taught by, you know,
The Austin
Einstein.
School, right?
Yeah, like they literally get taught by these figures. And then they go out into the community. And I thought, wow, that is such a cool idea for high schoolers. Like I thought, wow, that's cool. But the big push now is to bring it down to kindergartners. And I'm curious now what the long-term impact, and I think we should be curious. And I'm not saying anything bad about how people are doing things, but I think we should be real curious now instead of going back in hindsight going, wow, we really isolated those kids. And we know a lot about brain body responses, that we could actually transfer our own understanding into these settings and go, huh, is this what's best for a kindergartner? And I'm not sure it is.
Part of me just wants to stop right there because I so agree with you. And I think that the community and the relationships with the magic of a great teacher is what brings about the human soul and allows those students to develop connections, a conscience, and a love of lifelong learning. It's not from an agent on a computer, which I do use every day. I use AI every day, so I'm not negative on technology, obviously, or on AI, but there's a magic that happens within a school and within a great classroom that AI is not going to replicate. I do want to say you brought up right to start NCCE. I am presenting February 26th at 3 p.m. And my subject is basically the future of AI in education. And so the presentation will probably change radically between today and then because everything is changing radically. But yes, I love NCC also. They are a wonderful organization and we promote them and we hope everybody signs up for the conference in Seattle this year. It'd be great
Yeah,
to see everybody.
I feel bad. This is the first year I haven't presented there, but I'm presenting neuroplasticity and AI at Learning in the Brain in San Francisco, and I was just like, oh, I can't do both. Like it's not a thing, and so I hate missing out on NCCE. I just think it's a really great community.
It
So
is. It is.
it's
And they're one, I love the people that run NCC. They are a great group of volunteers and the paid employees. It's a high class group. So I hope to see anybody's listening to the podcast there. And Missy, thank you so much for joining us today on Vetted. And I hope I get to run into you at a conference in the near future.
Thanks, Mark.